And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I'm your host, Demo, and this is the top 10 commanders from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. I thought I would rank some of the commanders from this set. There's a bunch, and which ones essentially I think are the best to build around. That's what I look for. What commanders are going to make interesting decks? Maybe there's a few different ways you can go with them. This is a deck building channel in Commander, so of course I'm all about which commander is going to be the best for building a deck. So before I get to the list, I'm going to start out with a honorable mention, and that is Nihilure, 2, a white, a blue, and a black, so a Esper commander. Horror 3/5, and again, judging by the picture, even though some people might think this is an octopus or something, I believe that's an Illithid, also known as a Mind Flayer. And when Nihilure enters the battlefield, for each opponent, tap up to one untapped creature you control. When you do, gain control of target creature that player controls with power less than or equal to the tapped creature's power for as long as you control Nihilure. And whenever you attack with a creature an opponent owns, you gain 2 life and that player loses 2 life. So lots of fun, interesting things happening here. I think this is definitely a very interesting build around. The reason why I'm giving it an honorable mention though is because it's steal your opponent's stuff tribal, and that is really going to make you a target. I think I probably would really love to make a deck with this commander. I don't have an Esper deck currently, but to me, this is the commander that they see this in the command zone and they're like, oh, this guy's just going to be stealing my creatures all the time, so let's get him, or let's kill his commander as soon as it enters the battlefield, because as soon as they get your Nihilure off the table, then they get their stuff back, right? So this just becomes, here's my commander, please kill it so you can get your stuff back. That to me, that's going to make for a really difficult game for you, I think. So even though it's a really interesting, cool commander, I think it's going to be a difficult one to actually make a fun deck with. But getting to the list, coming in at number 10, Minsk, Beloved Ranger. Red, green, and a white, human ranger 3/3. When Minsk, Beloved Ranger enters the battlefield, create Boo, a legendary 1/1 red hamster creature token with trample and haste. And you can pay X until end of turn. Target creature you control has base power and toughness, XX, and becomes a giant in addition to its other types. Activate only as a sorcery. So I really like this. Really interesting commander. I think there's a few different ways you can go with it. I already did a commander quick brew with it, and I already did a full-on deck tech with it as well. So you can check out both of those videos. So I'm not going to dwell on Minsk anymore. I've already said a ton about it. Really interesting commander though. Coming in at number 9, Cradle of Baldur's Gate, blue and a black. Human Elf Rogue 1/3. When Cradle of Baldur's Gate deals combat damage to a player, that player loses 1 life and mills a card, then you gain 1 life and scry 1. Whenever you attack, you may pay 2. If you do, target creature can't be blocked this turn. So again, I already talked about this in my Commander Quick Brew with him, and I think, this is just interesting, first of all, because you can go a couple different ways with it. I would go more the unblockable tribal, essentially. You could do rogues here as well. I think you could almost do a rogue tribal deck with this, but I think probably the best way to go is I just want to put a bunch of creatures in here that I want to make unblockable. Also, Cradle goes in a lot of decks. I sort of have given a bonus marks to some of these commanders if I think they also go in the 99 of a lot of decks for other commanders, and Cradle definitely is going to be doing that. Coming in at number 8, dresdawarden, 3 green and a white, elf ranger 3/3. Has double strike. When dresdawarden enters the battlefield, create Gwenwivar, a legendary 4/1 green cat creature token with trample. Whenever a creature dies, if it had power greater than Drit's power, put a number of +1/+1 counters on Dritz equal to the difference. My first commander quick brew from this set talked about dresdawarden, and I think it's a very interesting commander to build around. First of all, again, doing a couple of different things, so there's a few different ways you can go with this. It's kind of interesting how Gwenwivar, the token, comes into play and actually has greater power than Dritz, so you can just immediately sack that token to put a counter on your Dritz if you want to. But I think it's really easy to just throw a bunch of creatures in there, like Force of Savagery is a really interesting one that you can just throw down. It'll immediately die, and then you can put a ton of counters on your commander. So it's kind of a fun endeavor to sort of search out creatures that have a really high power that can easily die. Makes for a really interesting build around, I think. Coming in at number 7, Grazilax, Illithid Scholar, 1 blue, 3/2 horror. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may return it to owner's hand. Whenever one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So again, I already did an actual deck tech with this guy. I did sort of a ninjutsu theme with this. The sort of the drawback of ninjutsu is once that ninja gets into play, now it's sort of almost a vanilla creature that you want to be getting in for damage. It doesn't really have have any evasion. None of those ninjas do. So this is a solution to that issue where now I have my ninja in play. I can attack with it, and if it becomes blocked, I'll just return it to my hand, so now I can ninjutsu it again. And if they don't want to block, fine, I'll draw a card. I think this is a fantastic build around. And again, just like Cradle, it's a card that probably goes in a lot of decks as well. I think this is definitely, because it works so good with ninjutsu, is going to go in a bunch of those Yuriko decks, for which there are many. Coming in at number 6, Trellara Moondancer, green and a white elf cleric. 2/2. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Trellara Moondancer and scry 1. What I really like about this commander, I mean, first of all, it's only 2 mana. I really like when you have a commander that's 2 mana that you can get out right away and start going to town with it. I don't want to wait till turn 6 or 7 before my deck can start doing what it's doing. I know the obvious direction here seems like a gain life theme, but also, you know, yeah, you're gaining life. You're also putting +1/+1 counters on your commander. So you can also go that direction. And again, as I talked about in the commander quick brew that I did, the scry 1 should not be overlooked. That really, you know, you're going to be scrying 1 a lot. If you have a soul warden in play, you're going to be gaining 3, 4, 5 life on every turn cycle, or maybe more. And so you're going to be scrying 3 or 4 or 5 every single turn cycle. That's a whole lot of scrying. And it's going to make it really easy for you to set up the top of your library and use miracle cards, for example, was one thing I said you could probably do in this deck, where it's very easy to set that miracle card up to be your next draw on your turn. So a really interesting commander to build around, I think. Coming in at number 5, Wolfgart of Icewind Dale, 3, a red and a green, human barbarian 4/4. Has melee. We haven't seen that one in a while. So whenever this creature attacks, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn for each opponent you attacked this combat. He has a very unique ability, though, of if a creature you control attacking would cause a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So that sort of panharmonicon type effect that they've been doing a lot lately, but with attack triggers. And I had come up with this idea. For anyone who's new to my channel, in the beginning, I was doing this series where I talked about cards that I created through MTG Cardsmith. And one of them was Dresdawarden, Warlord of Vex. This is a card that I made up probably like a year ago. And I had this idea, whenever a creature you control attacks, if it triggers an ability, that ability triggers a second time. Essentially the same idea. I think it's a great idea for a commander. There's lots and lots of creatures out there that have triggered abilities when they're attacking. So the build around here is fairly obvious, I suppose, which is fine. But, you know, because there are so many creatures with those triggered attack abilities and other things that are triggering when you're attacking, every Wolfgart deck is probably going to look a little different. You're not just going to be playing all the same cards. Also, again, I'm giving bonus marks here because I think Wolfgart goes in the 99 of a lot of other decks. I just did Gyrus, Waker of Corpses, in my Underwhelming Commanders video. This goes in there for sure, right? Because that is an attack trigger. Gyrus is going to attack, and now that ability is going to trigger twice. So you'll be able to create 2 different tokens of creatures that are in your graveyard. So it's definitely an auto-include in that deck. I think it's definitely an auto-include in a lot of different commander decks of any green and red commander that wants to be attacking a lot. Coming in at number 4, Volo, Guide to Monsters. 2, blue-green, human wizard, 3/2. Whenever you cast a creature spell that doesn't share a creature type with a creature you control or a creature card in your graveyard, copy that spell. Just such an interesting ability. And the flavor here is fantastic, of course, because Volo in D&D is a guy who sort of travels around and catalogs monsters. That's sort of what he does. So the flavor is really great, right? You know, you're getting a payoff for playing lots of different creatures. As I said in the Commander Quick Brew that I did, it's sort of a reverse or an opposite of tribal, where you're doing non-tribal. You don't want the same creatures. And of course, because Volo is a human and wizard, you don't really want to have any humans and wizards in here. But as people already pointed out on that video, you can do the unnatural selection sort of creature type changing thing. So you can say have some humans and wizards in the deck, and if you're going to cast your Eternal Witness, you just quickly change your Volo's creature type to anything that isn't a wall, and then you'll get the copy of the Eternal Witness. So that's another direction you could go with the deck. Very interesting. And again, because you have so many options, I think even though most Volo decks are going to be doing the same thing, every Volo deck is going to be completely different because people are going to be choosing the creatures that they want to put in the deck. Coming in at number 3, Karazhakar, the Eye Tyrant, 3 black, red, another Beholder legendary creature, and it's a 5/5. Whenever you attack a player, tap target creature that player controls and goad it. So another goading commander. Whenever an opponent attacks another one of your opponents, you and the attacking player each draw a card and lose 1 life. Very interesting build around here, I think. Obviously, you want to be goading. You know, there's already Carder, which I had done an underwhelming commanders video on. That definitely this is going in that deck. These guys go in each other's decks, no question. But what makes Karazhakar even better, I think, is that second ability where whenever an opponent attacks another one of your opponents, you and the attacking player each draw a card. So very similar to Brina, the Demagogue, right? This commander is sort of a combination of Carder, Doomscourge, and Brina, you know, sort of combined, where you're goading and you're also encouraging your opponents to attack each other. That's the part that I really like. Yes, you can goad your opponent's creatures, and when they attack each other, you get to draw. But also, even if you're not goading them, right? Maybe your opponents are just going to want to attack each other so that they can get that draw, like when you're playing a Brina deck. You know, I don't love the idea of letting your opponents draw, but encouraging them to attack each other is definitely worth it, I think. So really interesting build around there. Coming in at number 2, Minwiley Illusionist, and this is a really interesting one. 1 blue, Gnome Wizard 1/3. When you draw your second card each turn, create a 1/1 blue illusion creature token with this creature gets +1/+0 for each other illusion you control. So right out of the gate, that first ability, we're in the I want to draw a second card each turn situation. So now that's something I got to build around. Also, it's illusion tribal, which is something we haven't seen before. It's making illusion tokens, but also wants us to have illusions, right? Because those illusions get +1/+0 for each other illusion you control. So you can just make a bunch of illusions with your commander, but you can also put other illusions in the deck that are going to pump up the illusion tokens that you make. Lord of the Unreal is obviously going to be an auto include in this deck as well, but we're not even close to being done yet here. Whenever an illusion you control dies, so again, not just the tokens, but any illusion you control dies, you may put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to the creature's power from your hand onto the battlefield. What a fantastic ability. Man, this is a great commander to build around. Really, really fantastic. There's so much going on here. So now I want a bunch of illusions in play, even if I'm just making the illusion tokens with my commander. And it's whenever you draw a second card each turn. So now I can do it on my opponent's turns as well. I can draw 2 cards on my turn, just like with Jolrael, very similar build there, except obviously in blue instead of green, where I'm trying to draw cards on other people's turns, maybe as well as mine. I can just draw 2 cards on my turn and make an illusion token, but now maybe I want to cast that brainstorm on my opponent's turn, draw 3 cards, so now I get that trigger, I get that other illusion, and I'm increasing the amount of illusions I have in play so that if there's a board wipe, say for example, now all my illusions die, and I get that dies trigger for each of those illusions. So if I have 4, for example, they all get +1/+0 for each other illusion you control. So each of them is going to be a 4/1 because they're all going to get +3/+0. And when they die, I get 4 of these triggers. So what I can do is I can put 4 permanent cards with mana value 4 or less from my hand onto the battlefield. Now, maybe I don't have that many. You know, this is sort of the tricky part about it. And what I actually really like about it, you can't just play a mono blue spell slinger. I throw a bunch of counter spells in my deck with this, or else you're just not going to get the value. You don't want to do that. If you have a bunch of instants and sorceries in your hand, when your illusions die, you're not going to be able to put anything onto the battlefield. So you're going to want to put a lot of permanents in this deck so that you can take advantage of that second ability. Really, really interesting, fantastic creature. You know, I don't know what people are saying about it yet, if people are really buzzing about it. Usually that you can put permanents from your hand onto the battlefield, you know, without casting them. You know, cheating mana cost stuff is always something that really grabs people's attention. So I don't know how much people are really buzzing about this commander, but I think it's a fantastic build around. But coming in at number 1 is Oswald Fiddle Bender. 1 and a white, Gnome Artificer 2/2. Pay white and tap. Sacrifice an artifact. Search your library for an artifact card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed artifact's mana value. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Activate only as a sorcery. And again, I already talked about this in a Commander Quick Brew video. He's basically a birthing pod, but for artifacts, which of course is fantastic. I love that they made him mono white and didn't add any more colors in here. I basically decided on this being the number 1 commander because it was mono white, and I think mono white needs some more really great commanders. I actually really like how little color is on this list in general. There's actually quite a few monocolored commanders on this list, which I love. I think the format needs to gravitate more towards playing commanders with less colors. This is obviously a very powerful ability. There's lots you can do with it. Like I said in that Commander Quick Brew video, I'm a little concerned that maybe it gets too powerful and people start playing this in sort of a CEDH fashion where I go get stacks pieces and stuff like that. And, you know, which is fine, but I just don't want it to get ruined. I don't want it to be like a Heliod where now I can't play Heliod in a casual game because everyone just goes with the combo. I'm a little concerned there. Also, though, why Oswald ended up being number one is, again, I think it's a fantastic build around, yes, but also goes in so many decks. Basically, any deck that has white that's dealing with artifacts is going to want Oswald in there. Just a really fantastic card in general, but also a fantastic commander and a really great build around. So that is it for the top 10 commanders from the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. There's definitely some really fantastic ones here. I think overall, you know, I wasn't super thrilled with the set as far as the 99 cards go. I didn't think that the 99 cards were particularly fantastic. Definitely some really great commanders though. I'm really impressed with some of the commanders. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.